Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. I'd like to welcome you back. This is part 2 of the mastering series. And on this episode, we're going to be checking out a tune called Renegade by the Odd Chaps. And they would really appreciate it if you could check them out. So I'm going to leave a link to them if you want to go. It's going to be in the description box. And my links, as well as always, are going to be in the description box. So, for this episode, we're going to be going over a few things, but to begin with, we're going to kind of have an overview of what I did on the track. And then afterwards, we're going to delve more specifically into the low end and how to perfect that low end. So to start off with, the most obvious thing I noticed when I opened up this file was the offset, the DC offset. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I had a few references here. I keep down here. Also, I'm going to see about posting maybe this mastering template on the description box, maybe if I could do that or something like that. But I'm going to see about posting this template I use here, where it basically has the track up here, automation clips you'd put right here, and then references down here. But anyways, the two references I used were, first of all, another copy, a different copy of the song they sent me, and then also Shave It by Zed, because, I mean, what better electro song to reference it by? So let me show you what it looks like when there's no DC offset. So you can see right here, there's just a perfectly straight line, correct? Just right down the center of the sound wave file here. Just goes right down. And you can see as you move it across, it's still the same. It's just right down the middle. The sound wave moves across right down the middle. So you can see from the center of the waveform, or of the file here, the white sound waves are equal distances from the center. That means that there's no DC offset. Now, on the other hand, let's take a look at what DC offset looks like. Okay, you see this one's straight down here, that's Z. Up here, this is the file we're mastering, and you can see that it kind of curves down. That's a dead giveaway that there is DC offset, but there's another kind of giveaway I noticed when I opened up the file. And it's right up here. You can see that it looks like it kind of droops down right in this area, and then it looks like it kind of goes up right in this region. And that is indicative of DC offset. And what that basically is the computer reading that there's a sound wave going through, even though there isn't, and it essentially just eats up headroom. It generally doesn't sound like anything, although occasionally it can sound like aliasing. Most of the time it just eats up headroom, and you really don't want that when you're mastering, so we're going to remove that. One way you can remove it is by double clicking and hitting remove DC offset, and that only fixes part of the problem, because say for instance on the file like this one where there's no DC offset in the beginning, and then all of a sudden they introduce a new plugin and there's DC offset somewhere else in the song. When we do this, sure, it'll fix for the most part the DC offset that is occurring over here, but it'll actually introduce DC offset in different parts of the song that don't currently have DC offset. It essentially removes the DC offset from the most offset point of the song and sort of kicks it back a little bit, but then at the same time it introduces it at a place where there's no DC offset. So the way I remove it is I just open up an instance of Fruity Center and open it up, put status on, and you're good to go. That's all it is, very simple. And what that is a real-time DC offset removal tool. It's very useful, especially if you use 3x oscillator. Okay, so we took care of DC offset right there. Yeah, okay, we're good then. Another thing I want to mention is that I did a little bit of automating here. And you can automate when it comes to mastering. Typically, I don't, and typically, I would say most people don't, but there are quite a few people who do use automation, and it is useful sometimes when you need to change some kind of equalizer just for a brief period of time if you want to remove some kind of harsh frequencies. That's exactly what I did here. Let me play it without. You're going to notice that there's a saw wave building here, and it's a little bit harsh. So actually, let me just play the track for you guys. Gotta turn our references off. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to stop it right there. And I don't know if you're going to pick this up through my microphone, but during this part right in here, during the build-up, it's kind of a harsh saw wave that's kind of coming through. It's really piercing, sort of a high-pitched beep, beep, beep. Well, to sort of curb that, I was kind of wondering how I'd do that. I was wondering if maybe I could use some EQ or something. You can see I automated right here. I actually used some multiband compression. Dynamics. Right here, I think it was. Yeah, right there. So essentially what I did is I took a multiband compressor with a ratio in the high-mid range of 8:1, and then I automated the threshold down to compress that saw wave a little bit, that really harsh kind of super saw wave. And it worked out really well. Sometimes when you do that kind of stuff, you'll notice it kind of compromises the rest of the song, and so it's usually not a good idea to do it, but in this case it turned out really well, so that's good. So you got to hear some of the tune. Already ran, but it was running through some of the chain. Let me talk really quick about the chain. On this tune, I was trying out a plugin I just bought, actually, LoAir, and LoAir is phenomenal. I really, really like it. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but and kind of learning what how different knobs affect the sound, but we'll get into more of this when I talk about the low end later. So, first of all, I ran it through an SSL channel. Sorry about that. That was I was gonna say, this is one of my go-tos when I'm mastering. I don't always use it, but I do most of the time, especially in dance music songs where you really want a lot of punch, because it is a pretty crisp, punchy sort of a sound that you get with this. I added 1 dB at 14,000 hertz, and that's kind of where I started out. It added a little bit of a sort of shimmer on top, but if I had to redo this master, I might dial it back probably a few fraction of a dB. Then at 1 kilohertz, I boosted half a dB with a rather narrow Q. I boosted half a dB at 400 hertz with a rather wide Q, and then I don't think I boosted down here. Yeah, okay. And then the way I decided that, I think I've shown you in previous tutorials, but basically I just crank the volume on a certain knob way up, and then I just sweep it, and then when it sounds about right, I dial the dB down a little bit, and then I can adjust the Q as well to taste. And then another way I can also determine where I need to boost or cut is when I open up the Ozone interface here. You can take a look at the spectrum of the song we're mastering, and then if it looks like we need a little bit of a balance in one region or another, we can always boost or cut there. Let me demonstrate here for you. So I took a quick snapshot here just to kind of give you an idea of how it looks on the spectrum. And you can see it's pretty bright. It's a little bit brighter than pink noise. It's also a little bit bassier than pink noise, which means logically there'd be a little bit less mid than the rest of the tune. So that's why I did a little bit of adding in the SSL. That's more or less a good way to check. I'm sorry, I just had a extra large soda, so I'm kind of burping here. But that's one way to more or less check the balance of something if you don't have necessarily the ears yet to do that. But that's definitely a good way to do it. And then after you do that, I would recommend doing that trick I was telling you about earlier, where you sweep the really boosted region and then dial it down. That's kind of a good way to center in on exactly where you need to boost. I hope that makes sense. Basically, if you can't do it by ear, look on the graph here, see where you need to do some boosting, and then open up your EQ, whatever EQ you're using. Boost in that region and kind of sweep it around a little bit, and then if it sounds good, then go ahead and dial it back and make some settings that sound good on the track overall. Hope that makes sense. So that's how we achieve some balance. Let me delete this. You can also see right here I have a number of Porter Robinson songs that I use sometimes for referencing the spectrum on. I also have a ton more. Let me see here. Do I have it in here? No. Have it in somewhere. Yep. You can see I have a bunch of different snapshot files here. I got Zed, I got mine, various that are just various EDM artists. I have various #1, more Skrillex, Porter, Madion, Noisia, just a whole bunch of different ones depending on the genre I'm looking at. But I'd say it's a good idea to start saving those and checking that out when you're mastering to see how it compares. Now let's move on here. Next thing I noticed, well, let me show you here. Okay, so you can see that the bass I've centered. Let me bypass this. Okay, well, the bass here is really stereo. I mean, you know, it's out there. You saw it right there, is just kind of all over the place. When you're in club settings, you might get some problems as far as phase cancellation and the like. And if you're in a stereo club, which there's not too many of those that play in stereo, you might end up with some sort of messy results. As a result, most of the tunes I master, I try to pull in the bass as much as possible. Not completely mono, but at the same time, I really don't want it all over the place. If you analyze a lot of other songs, you'll notice that as well, the bass is pulled in towards the center, and that's just so it's a lot easier on the club's subwoofer, because the subwoofer is in mono. And it's not, you know, super, you know, it's not MIDI or anything like that, MIDI stuff. It's more bassy stuff below, I would say, 150 hertz. You see up here it's about 200 hertz that it's up to. But yeah, I did a huge merging here with minus 80% width. But the way I did that is I started out like this, and then I just kind of got a feel for it. And then when it sounded good, I just used that number. But that's more or less how I did it. Then I also used some saturation here. I love the dual triode mode. And I just kind of tuned it to taste, the way it sounds. And the way you do that is have the mix all the way up at 100%. Turn the amount up to a place that sounds good. It might sound a little bit extreme, but as long as it sounds good, that's all you need. And then dial the mix down to where it sounds smooth and blends really well. So that's more or less the main parts of this song I wanted to discuss. Now, a little bit more for the in-depth on the low end. So, let's see what time. Okay. Well, these guys came to me and they said they really wanted to get a really tight low end. So, my instinct was to put on a max bass plugin from Waves and call it a day, kind of mess around with it. But I noticed that there was already quite a bit of high-end bass, like in the plus 120 region or 150 region, and it was easily heard on small speakers like laptops and all that good stuff, but there wasn't really anything that was chest rumbling like you'd hear in the clubs that are really you know, that really nice chest feeling bass. So I decided to try out LoAir. I just got it, as I said before, and I've been playing around with the settings here. It's kind of a curious plugin because, well, what it basically does, the LoAir creates harmonics, but at the same time, it also generates a tone an octave below where the input's coming from. So if the input, sorry about that. So if the input is coming from 80 hertz, for instance, it would generate a harmonic at 40 hertz, which is one octave below. It's pretty impressive, and I kind of had to play with it quite a bit to get some good settings, but I was going to go with 90 hertz, but 100 hertz didn't hurt too much, so I went there. I dialed LoAir to barely any 0.0 or 0.1, and even if it's in the negative range here, it'll still generate that octave and those harmonics. It's only when it's at minus infinity that it doesn't generate anything. And then the low end, again, that generates a little bit of low end EQ boost, but I went to minus 0.5, which is still a little bit of a boost, but not a whole lot. And then direct, well, let me just demonstrate. It's sort of like you're soloing the bass when you have it off. Alright, so you can see that's kind of like a dry wet, and right there we just have it all the way at 0. So basically it means that the rest of the track above 100 hertz is being played along with 100 hertz, whatever is below 100 hertz. When you turn it all the way down, it just plays whatever is below the number you set in the range. And then the output is pretty self-explanatory. It's just the gain, output gain. Trim, it sort of prevents it from clipping in real time. So if you have a really loud section, I would say hit trim once and it would dial the volume down so that you're not clipping throughout the rest of your track. And then finally, the most important part of this plugin is Align. At least in my opinion, I think that's probably the best feature. So there's a little bit of a latency between the added harmonics and the rest of the track and the low end on the track. So if you hit Align, it'll align those two so that it's playing right in time. If you want sort of a, well, if you have the plugin, try it out yourself and you'll kind of get different results. But usually, let me demonstrate here. I get the feeling that it's a lot more tighter with the Align on. The bass kick is right on. Everything's right on. Whereas with it off, it's maybe a little bit flabby, doesn't sound quite in sync. But like I said, just experiment around with it and see if you like it, and if it sounds good. So that's probably one of the main things I did on the low end. Another thing I did on the EQ here, let's see here. I did a low shelf. I subtracted 2 dB from the sides, so the blue's the sides here, which basically makes it a little bit narrower, as I was saying before, really narrows it down into the middle. And that way, when I go to the stereo imager, I don't have to subtract the width as much. And then finally, what I did is that's what I did. I also did a little bit of compression, and 4:1 usually is considered technically limiting, as you can see right here, but the threshold's really high, and then the attack set's really slow, and the release is really fast. So if anything, it just sort of takes out any non-transient bass sounds that go over a certain point, and it's just to prevent the bass from sort of overwhelming everything else. Let me demonstrate. So it's very, 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 very subtle, only a fraction of a dB, but at the same time, it just kind of like a little addition to make sure that it does stay below the threshold. Because there are a few parts later on, let me see if I could find them. I think there were a few parts later on where it did get a little bit louder in the bass, and that really helped tame it out. But that is, for the most part, it. One last thing I'm going to talk about is dither as well. So I mentioned dither before. There's mbit plus, that's the dither algo for iZotope. If you want to use dither in FL Studio, all you do is export wave file, hit save, or whatever you want your file to be called, and then make sure it's 16-bit integer. And then if you're going to, unless you're just going to have a friend listen to it to check it out, I strongly recommend doing 512 point sync. Basically, each of these is a step up in quality. It takes a little bit longer for the 512 point sync to export, but it is quite a bit better. And if you're going to release the song, you're going to want to do it like that. And if you're sending it off to a mastering engineer, you're going to want to do it in 512 point sync as well. And then if you want to add the dithering, go ahead and click dithering, and it will dither to 16 bits. So you're good to go. And and finally, last part, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the extra automation I did here. So they wanted me to, in essence, add a little bit of reverb to the end of this. So let me see what I did here. What I basically did here, there's a couple last notes. And the last notes are basically put through Rverb, another Waves plugin. And in essence, all I did was automate the reverb to become a little bit more louder. A little bit louder, yeah. You can see right here. I connected that to send one from this part in the mixer here. So the track is going through insert one, and insert one is going to send one, and then I increase the volume on send one. Send one has the reverb, and then I also did DC offset removal before the reverb just to get a little bit better quality. And then finally, last thing I'll talk about is the limiter. They also heard the song the first few times I mastered it for them, or I should say the first few editions that I mastered for them. The first few revisions I did. They thought the outro was a little bit overcompressed, so I actually automated the outro. With I automated the limiter. I'll show you here. Check it out. You can see it all of a sudden goes from -8 to -7, so we're doing 1 dB less of limiting. And then when we get back to the reverb part over here, I actually dial it even more than it was before, so you get a little bit more of a louder reverb at the end. Let me demonstrate. right here. So it goes from, you can see that it cuts though from at the end here from minus 7 dB of as the threshold down to minus 11. I'll show you again. Okay, that's how that is done. Well, I'll discuss that probably on a later lesson. But I was going to talk a little bit about dither and what most significant bit depth is. Again, if you have any questions, leave a comment. If you want to check them out, link in the description. Want to check my stuff out, link in the description as well. And then quick other word about mastering. You're going to want to get the best equipment possible to listen on. Sometimes it's really not about the equipment of the processing. It's not so much, you know, having expensive plugins or having an expensive hardware interface, all that good stuff. That's not the most important part. The most important part of mastering is having a good place to listen back to the songs you're mastering. Right now I have 2 KRK subwoofers, but I do have access to some Yamahas, and I got a subwoofer, and I have some foam here in this room. If you want to get a good master, you're going to want to put in at least some time and some money to treating your room. It's very important. And if you don't have a subwoofer, it's going to be a little bit difficult to really nail that low end, but nonetheless, you could probably give it a try. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.